Hey everybody, I don't know about you, but as you've watched out over the world, the war in Russia and Ukraine is not just isolated to Eastern Europe. It's spread all over the world, and you can see it in market instabilities. You can see it here. People who do not think that that war is affecting you, all you got to do is look at gas prices. You look at your food prices. You see the global change that has happened. But you know something that's also affected investments as well. And I've said all along, legacy precious metals is your navigator. They're the ones that see you through to get to the next level. The good news about this is even with market volatility, market instability, you've got options. And gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold. And gold presents a hedge against this inflation and that protects you against the weakening dollar, which we are seeing. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust to deal with gold and silver and the other precious metals. You need this investment. You need this as part of your portfolio to keep you buffered from what we're seeing in the world, war and volatility in the market. This is where you need to be. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive about this. Get on board with it. Call them at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. legacypminvestments.com, your navigator in a volatile world of investments.
Do you want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Collins. Welcome to the Doug Collins Podcast. We got a lot to talk about today. We're sort of summing up the week of things that have been happening, and I want to touch on just keeping us up to date. We've been a lot of politics. There's been a lot of things going on in the world. We've had elections, primaries, the inflation crisis, everything that's been going on. And so this week, I just sort of wanted to spend some time, take a few episodes, and this one being one, to just catch up on some issues that we may not have had a lot of time with. And doing so, the first thing I want to catch up with is this week is election week here in Georgia, Alabama. You had Arkansas. Some have called it the SEC primary. That happened. And we just coming off the results in Georgia. And I'll tell you what was struck out to me, the first and foremost, is the power of the incumbency. And also, frankly, the power of people, it looks like, to want to move on from the election of 2020. And that's one of the issues that has came up. In Georgia, you saw the governor, Brian Kemp. You saw the Attorney General, Chris Carr. You saw Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, John King, who's the insurance commissioner, all win without a runoff. In fact, last night it looks like there's coming along this timing. You may not have a statewide runoff in Georgia. The last one out there is still lingering a little bit. And by the time the podcast is out, probably will in the next few hours we will have the results that Burt Jones may have avoided a runoff there. Why is this significant? It's significant in the sense that it shows you what we talked about with Chip Lake the other day. We talked about politics. Politics is fundamentals. Politics comes down to a lot. It is important. Donald Trump's endorsement is still one of the most powerful endorsements in the Republican primaries and in these races going forward. We've seen that in Ohio. We've seen it in Pennsylvania. What we had not seen in Georgia was the power of the incumbency, which we did not have in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and some of these others. Why is that important? Because it's fundamentals. Governor Kemp, who was a 3.5-year governor, had 3.5 years of running for reelection. He had been spending that time building a power base, growing that power base, coming off of the previous election that he won, and taking the time to do the basics real well. And his team ended up doing a good job of that. What that did was when David Perdue got in the race in December, although he had the backing of the president, former President Trump, and a lot of base real concern and anger, he was never able to build the fundamental coalitions of money, team, and message. And that's what we saw coming out last night, I believe, in the state of Georgia. Perdue did everything he could, but in many ways, Kemp, even before he got in, had already undercut him. If you look at the race here in Georgia, and many people are going to talk about this being, a lot of things from a stunning defeat for the former president to, to just, whatever else you want to make up. the real issue that came up was when you look at these races, bottom line, Trump's endorsement helps and it gives you a standing. But at the end of the day, if your campaigns are not based on fundamentals, then you're going to have problems. We saw that in the attorney general's race here in Georgia. We saw it in the insurance commissioner's race here in Georgia. John Gordon and Patrick Whit both got in at qualifying. That leaves you less than 3 months to develop a fundraising campaign, develop a strategy, develop anything that can get you elected in a statewide race. That is very important. So as you look at this, but you go around and the rest of the country, you saw Mo Brooks last night get in a runoff with Britt. So it's Brooks and Britt in the runoff for Senate in Alabama. You see Sarah Huckabee Sanders won the nomination out in Arkansas for governor. Bozeman also actually gets renominated for his Senate seat out there. So again, both of those were Trump endorsed. We see a lot happening. So I think the interesting thing is what I have said here about Georgia for a long time. Georgia was just in that state where we have lived elections for almost 2 years. We never really had a break after November 2020. The elections were not always on the front and center. People talking about them, people talking about what happened with the votes, the ballots, the counting, everything else. And then last night when the people had a chance to vote, we saw the power of traditional politics come back into play, and that is an incumbent. Incumbents have an inherent advantage. In the state of Georgia, the governor has a huge advantage of who he can appoint to boards, how he works with the legislature, how he gets money distributed. And we saw this. And Kemp basically undercut Perdue before he started, as I've said, taking some of his key advisors and putting them on boards, taking them out of place, even put Sonny Perdue as chancellor of the regents here in Georgia. Again, Sonny is David's cousin. And that effectively kept Sonny Perdue, who is a very popular politician here in the state of Georgia, off the campaign trail. He also appointed one of David's former just main advisors and supporters to a board down here, which again kept him off of the campaign trail. And so when you look at this, a lot of stories are going to be made of it. Does it show that there was that the Trump endorsement did not make the difference here in Georgia? Well, I guess the obvious point is no, it didn't. There was not the win there. There were a couple of candidates who've made runoffs. Vernon Jones has made a runoff down here, and so has Jake Evans. Both were Trump endorsed. Evans was late in the game. Vernon Jones, of course, was earlier on. They both made runoffs, but it is going to be interesting to the fact that there'll be no statewide runoff to actually give cover. It looks like at this time. That still may change the lieutenant governor's race, but it's there. So what's the takeaway from this? Takeaway from this is Trump's endorsement still very valuable, but in some of these races, especially against incumbents, it's not going to be the determinant if the candidate is not liked. What we have found is that if the candidate, if it's a race like Ohio or a Senate race with Vance and Mandel and the others, you had McCormick and Oz in Pennsylvania, a mixed field. The Trump endorsement gives people, okay, I'm not sure who to vote for. Trump endorsement gives them that extra advantage. But when you're going up against the incumbents, as you did out here in Georgia, it gave the Trump endorsement gave the endorsee a benefit of legitimacy with some voters. But at the end of the day, it's also about liking that candidate. It's also about that candidate being able to get their message out. It's also about the candidate doing the basics. I can't say this enough, folks. Politics is simple. It's math. It's just math. It's fundamentals. Can you get the money? Can you get the ad time? Can you get the face time? Can you get the voter contact? All of which are metrics that can be measured. And then you will see how you're going to do an election. That's just the basics. I don't care if you're a city council member to a United States presidency race. You got to look at the numbers. And that's what we saw here in Georgia looking ahead. Still a lot more races across the country in which, again, we see the power of the president's endorsement, but we also see the realities in some of these states, that Georgia being the top one now, in which you have to have the combination of both. I think we saw that most explicitly in the Secretary of State's race down here. Most would have told you that Brad Raffensperger would not have even run. This May of last year, there was a lot of folks saying Brad Raffensperger is not even going to run. Jody Heiss gets in the race. He gets the endorsement almost a year ago. And a lot of concern that that was what he was depending on. And I know Jody very well. I know he wanted to win, but yet never was able to raise money, never was able to get a campaign team going. His consultants undoubtedly, either didn't have a plan or didn't know what to do with it. We'll see. But at the end of the day, for me to say here on this podcast in May of 2022 that Brad Raffensperger just won the Republican primary without a runoff is just amazing. In many ways, has to be the political comeback of the century in many ways here in Georgia politics, because in all fairness, nobody gave Raffensperger a chance of avoiding a runoff and then possibly getting beat in a runoff. Instead, he avoids the runoff altogether. He's going into the general election as the Republican nominee. That's where Georgia is going to have to come together, and I believe. I will support our Republican nominees. Governor Kemp, Herschel Walker, the rest of them on there, Raffensperger, Kemp, Carr, the rest, because in Georgia, for me, as we've made out many times here, the conservative case, there's no choice between the radical left agenda that is being pushed by Abrams and Warnock and others on the Democratic platform that is anyway good for Georgia and wouldn't be good for the country. We've already seen that happen when we lost the Senate races down here, and the Democrats assumed control of the U.S. Senate, giving Biden a chance to appoint justices and do things like that. So, look, I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. We're going to win. We got to go out and fight in November to win these races. But that's sort of where we're at with the primary. So, again, a lot of surprises in the primary here in Georgia. A lot of people read a lot into it, and the mainstream media is going to want to, take down President Trump and say, he's fallen standing. And look, did his endorsements lose last night? Yeah, they did. But is it the whole picture? No, I don't think it is. And I think that's why I wanted just to spend a few minutes here saying, look, incumbency matters. Political campaigns matter. You have to have the basics down. You don't have the basics down, you can't get some of this stuff done. That's what we were seeing in Georgia in these races. Just a note, you said, well, what about Brad Raffensperger and how he did? Again, a textbook campaign. He went out, he did it's sort of very similar to Governor Kemp, but except in different. This is a different perspective. Kemp avoided a lot of the GOP meetings in which he would take criticism. In fact, he went only to a couple, and when he was questioned, and it got from some of the more conservative base, he just quit answering questions and just didn't go back. He stayed with groups that were very favorable to him. He worked his media campaign. Republican Governors Association kicked in a big way, and he was able just to sort of avoid that what now looks to be a 15 to 25% base that just, he wasn't going to win over anyway. He stuck to the rest of the field. Raffensperger did it differently, and I think had to. Raffensperger was farther down in this race when it first started. Raffensperger went to these groups that vehemently opposed him, that thought that he had a part in a stolen election, that he didn't do enough. And yet he went to these places. He was set for radio interviews. He took phone calls. And what I heard from folks is after that went on is that the issue was that they may not vote for him. They may not still like him. They still think he should have done something, but they respected the fact that he actually showed up. That's going to be an interesting twist as we go into the fall a little bit as to how Kemp and Raffensperger, Carr, and others down here, the Attorney General, actually sort of mend the fences with the base that is going to have to turn out. That Trump base, that 25% that voted for or 26, 20+% that voted for Purdue and others are going to have to turn back out for a Republican victory in Georgia. So I think it is interesting when you talk about campaigns matter. Please, please, please. I think we've got to, in many ways, stop buying this line that you can just come from nowhere and win. The reality is, if you look at most of the candidates who, quote, come from nowhere, the outsider, however you want to put it, you look at their campaigns, they have the basics down pat. They got a lot of money, they got a lot of ground support, and that they build during the campaign, and that's what wins elections. Endorsements are very important, but at the end of the day, you still got to look at what actually happens here. And I think that was an interesting point of view in Alabama as well with the Britt and Brooks race. Brooks was written off after the endorsement was pulled from Mo Brooks. Mo Brooks didn't give up. He has a base that was going to be loyal to him. He kept fighting. And Durant fell back in the polls, just was not connecting due to a lot of issues that were attacks on him. And then Britt and stayed in the basic position, but Brooks made it into the runoff. So that'll be an interesting runoff in the state of Alabama. We'll see if the president comes in on that race, because that's a non-incumbent race. We'll see if he decides to endorse any one of those candidates. I would tend to think it probably would not be Brooks. It may be Britt, but we'll see how that goes going forward in the future. But that's a quick update on and catching up is the elections, the primary process are going on. And I haven't really commented about it, but I wanted to now for you and the listener of the podcast just to know this is for all the stories that are out there. For those of us on the ground, here's the real story. The real story was incumbency, primary, and campaigns matter. You got to have them all to actually win. Let's turn our attention to something we've talked about here on the podcast. I'm going to bring it up again because this one is just sort of blows my mind a little bit. This is I have a problem with what's going on with the abortion debate right now, and especially in the process of how it is playing out in certain groups and the hyperbole that we've seen on all sides. From the left, you would swear that the draft leak, which, by the way, still has not come out. We're still waiting for the final opinion from the Supreme Court to actually come down on this. But if you were to listen to the left, you would say that, abortion has been banned, that women's health has been put in, is just total. Nothing's happened yet, remember. And let me remind the podcast listeners, let me remind you folks, you've been on here before, that if Roe v. Wade is overturned on the federal level, it does not end abortion in this country. Now, that's for some of us who are pro-life, that's not, really what we would want to hear, but that's the truth. It does not end abortion. It simply puts it back in the states. And that is where it should have been to begin with. That's where it was. We've done a whole podcast on this. Go back and listen to the podcast. In fact, today, if you download this episode, share it with somebody. If they want to see those episodes, go to wherever they get their podcast. And it was just a little bit ago. We'll make sure that they can see the whole issue, because abortion is one of the things that is a fact, abortion will be an issue in the November general election. Will the Democrats use it now as they are to try and deflect from the high inflation, the high cost of everything, the gas prices, the stock market, all of these things? Is that going to be the distraction that they try to use with voters to say, look, don't worry about how bad the economy is right now. It'll be okay. It'll recover. But look what's happening to these awful Republicans who are trying to take away, this choice of abortion. And again, it's sort of a life and death kind of situation. I mean, taking the life of the unborn versus the quote health care of females. I think it's going to be an interesting debate. Some states it'll carry well, some states it's not going to carry as well. But I lay all that in because I wanted to discuss this issue that came out this week, and that was the Archdiocese of San Francisco. The Archbishop out there basically said that they were no longer going to give communion to Nancy Pelosi over her continued support of abortion and actively working to expand and to deal with abortion. The D.C. Archdiocese, who is Wilton Gregory, has said he is not making an issue of it at this point, and we'll see where that goes. The reason I bring this up is the outrage that I have seen from folks up to and toward the Catholic Church. And let's make it very clear here. The Catholic Church has a very strong pro-life, non-abortion position. They have been against killing babies for the ever. This is not a new position. This is part of their church doctrine. It has been reinforced by every leadership in the Catholic Church for years and years and years. It's also like very much of a doctrine, of male priesthood. There's just doctrines in the Catholic Church that are part of who the Catholic Church is. And it's interesting to me. Now, aside from this debate with Nancy Pelosi taking communion, and again, communion being a sacrament in the Catholic Church, this is a big deal. What amazes me is as you talk about this, you have the media and others, including the San Francisco paper editorial board, saying that the leader in the Archdiocese of San Francisco who did this, who banned from communion for Nancy Pelosi, ought to be removed and taken out of that leadership role. And I'm wondering about this. I sit here and I think about it, and this shows the frustration that I have. That the left is so wedded to this pro-abortion policy, this that they will not tolerate any dissent. And when you look at this idea, and I've left with this in being a pastor and being a chaplain in the Air Force, let me just say that you are free to express your religious beliefs any way you want to. That is the very ultimate idea of freedom of religion. If you want to worship as a Catholic, you worship as a Catholic. You want to worship as a Southern Baptist, as I am, worship as a Southern Baptist. Pick your choice, what you want. If you don't want to worship at all, that's your choice. If you want to worship nature, that's your choice. If you want to be, any form of your religious belief, that self-sustaining belief that you have, that is what you have in the United States, and the government cannot take that away from you. That is the very bedrock of who we are. What is bothering me in this is now, because you have a political position of abortion in which a major political leader in this country has said that she wants to continue, and she has no problem with abortion and the killing of the unborn in the womb. She has no problem with that, which goes contradictory to her own statements that she is a practicing faithful Catholic. Now, that is her interpretation of faithful Catholic, and I'll give her that. I will not take that away from Nancy Pelosi. She can interpret it any way she wants. What bothers me is that you have outside organizations of the press and others who are trying to change and trying to punish Catholic leaders who are simply enforcing Catholic doctrine. It is part of who they are. If you don't like the doctrine, then there are other ways that you can express that. And don't hand me this, well, I'm a Catholic, so I want to stay Catholic, I just disagree with church. Well, that's fine. Disagree with it. But understand, when the discipline is applied, when the actual standard is applied in the Catholic Church, just as it would be in a Baptist church or a Methodist church or any others, that is who the organization is. And freedom of religion allows those organizations to have their beliefs based on Scripture. The Catholic Church is based on Scripture, based on their teachings, that abortion is wrong. It's a moral sin. And to have the outside world say, look, and we've seen this in the Catholic Church with female priesthood. We've seen it with celibacy. We've seen it with a lot of issues. The question is the Catholic Church did not say, hey, come in and we'll adapt to you. The Catholic Church's doctrine has been very clear. So when I see the editorials out of the San Francisco paper, and I see a lot of other commentators on TV saying that the Catholic Church ought to punish this member of the diocese, this leader out in San Francisco, call on and say that they ought to be removed, but the Archbishop Cornell should change his perspective. Now, you can talk about, is it being applied universally? Probably not. Is it being applied in different ways? No, but there's no denying that this is a doctrine of the Catholic Church. This is what we believe. Again, this is the part that is bugging to me, that you have so many people who want an organization to fit their needs. This is what I have found in Scripture, and I'll take this in summing this part of this up, is to say, understand, the Bible says what the Bible says. The Bible has very instructions on how we are to live. It says that Jesus Christ is the only way to forgiveness, to seek eternal life. That is the only path. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. Now, you may not like that. And you say, well, I want to go to worship, and well, understand something. That is then your doctrine, and it's not the church's. It's not the Scripture's doctrine. That's your doctrine. In fact, the Bible even speaks of that people will come to an age in which they want to tickle their ears. In other words, they want pastors and preachers to just tickle their ears, tell them what they want to hear. Oh, you want to do that? That's fine. I don't care what Scripture says. You go do it. This is a monumental point in the faith community. If you don't believe it, fine. That's your belief. But to then have the outside forces try to force a change in that organization because they don't like the belief, that to me is wrong. Pelosi's got to deal with this. She's got to come up with her own reasons. She's already, sort of fought back against this. And if that's what she wants to do, fine. But again, for the outside organizations and all the world, abortion is going to be a topic that we're all going to discuss ad nauseum. between now and November. The Democrats are going to try and latch onto this. We've seen it in a political move already, and the decision is not even out. This was a decision that it was not final. Now, if it changes, we've talked about this as well, then there's going to be a lot of problems. But right now, this is something that's not even real, and you're already having the attacks on institutions that have historically been pro-life. What has to happen here is, folks, you practice your faith. But the outside organization is saying that a faith ought to change simply because outsiders don't like the way, or even folks who are inside the church don't like, then you change. If that's a change inside the church, then you change it from inside. But having someone condemned, an archbishop in San Francisco condemned because they're enforcing what the church doctrine has said forever, I rest my case. This has become more political. This is far more about a political position on abortion than it is anything else. We'll see as this plays out. But again, if you're going into an organization understanding what their standards are, then that is what you go into. You understand this is the standards of this organization. And if you can't live or want to be a part of that organization, then find one in which you can, whether it's a church or a social group, a club or whatever. This is where I have this problem, and it just continues to amaze me, especially when it comes to religious dogma here, that the Catholic Church, this is not a new position. They didn't come out with it last week. They didn't. This is not something new for them. And now when they actually enforce it, which again is surprising to me that more archbishops have not enforced this provision, the outside community, the left in particular, goes crazy on it. And I think it just needs to be called out. Real quickly, I will touch on this more at a later date. A tragedy in Texas this week at a school in which a deranged young man killed kids in an elementary school, killed a teacher in elementary school. My heart is broken for those families, those who have lost lives. But again, this politicization has already started, even from Joe Biden, who comes out and in a rant basically says, we got to pass, my political agenda on gun control to stop these things, realizing good and well that what they will pass does not affect and would not affect a legal gun owner in this country. Is sad, and using those events to do so are not going to help anybody, and they're definitely not going to help those who've lost their loved ones. We've got to do better at protecting our schools, protecting these targets in which these tragedies happen, and that is something I'll address in more in depth in another podcast. But I did want to just send the prayers for not only the families who've lost loved ones, but also the first responders and others who had to respond to that, and the effect that'll have on them in the future. So our prayers here at the Doug Collins Podcast go to them as we go. I want to finish up today on another note, something we've talked about in bits and pieces. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to probably put together a several set series on this whole issue of the Durham investigation, the whole Russia hoax collusion, and all pointing back to Hillary. It's amazing to me that all the major networks except Fox and others have not reported basically this case. The Sussman case, the Durham trial, is going on right now as we are on this podcast, and none of the major networks have picked up on it. None have emphasized the fact that all of this was directed by Hillary Clinton to be put out into the media, and they knew it wasn't true. They knew it was not true, but yet they were going to put it out there anyway because they were desperate to win an election because Hillary Clinton couldn't win. So what they do, they put out this fake Russian narrative. They then put out this narrative about his connections with this bank server in Russia. They put all of this out, all of it happening from the starting in the spring of 2016, going through the inauguration and past the inauguration of Donald Trump into the spring of 2017, in which you see the Mueller investigation begin. This is, again, folks, this is frustrating that you have mainstream media who have ignored the Hunter Biden laptop, who have ignored most anything of the corruption that went on with Hunter in China, Ukraine, everywhere else, his connection back to Joe Biden, have just simply ignored it. In fact, you had the Twitter actually censor and others censor even the information of the New York Post when they were reporting on it. And now we're starting to find out more and more. And I've said this all along, and I wrote a book about it called The Clock and the Calendar, the impeachments of Donald Trump, the Democrats' obsession with him. But it all comes back to these issues of the fake Russia narrative. And what is really disturbing here is a story that came out of this trial, was that the FBI leadership, including then Director Jim Comey, were fired up about the allegations of covert communications channel between Trump Organization and Russia's Alpha Bank in the days after Michael Sussman brought the allegations to the Bureau. Now, Sussman brought this, and this is important for you to hear. He brought these allegations on September 19th, 2016. Okay, follow these dates. I'll take you back real quickly. The spring of 16, you had the investigation of Hillary's email accounts. Remember, that came out of I can take you back further to the Benghazi, but it came out with her keeping improper emails, classified emails. She should have been charged at that time. She never was. In fact, Jim Comey got up in July and said, nope, we're not going to charge her. No reasonable prosecutor would charge this. What was not being said, besides that the Attorney General was already compromised by meeting with Bill Clinton on a tarmac in talking about this out in Arizona, the issue is that Hillary Clinton was getting away with the fact that she had kept this classified information on this server, and the FBI basically was doing nothing about it. In fact, they were concerned about that. Hillary's campaign was so concerned about the emails because they wasn't sure at the time what the FBI was going to do, that this began the narrative of the Russia hoax investigation. This is where Operation Crossfire Hurricane was the investigation into the Russian collusion narrative. Now, I tell you September 16th because I wanted to bring you back to June and July of 2016. Now, interestingly enough, the ones that they talk about on the seventh floor in this trial are the folks that we have been dealing with forever. These are the Jim Comeys, the Andy McCabe's, the Jim Bakers, the Bill Priestap, all of these people that had hands in the investigation of Donald Trump. This was started on false narrative, false information. This was the defamed dossier that was proved not to be true. And in 2016, they've added this into the cyber investigation. And what they have now found out, Jim Baker from the FBI actually has said this in the trial, that they found that it was something serious they wanted to look at. But after the investigation was conducted, they found that this that was not substantiated. Heidi actually said this in a testimony the other day, that the FBI was unable to substantiate the allegations in the white paper. They knew this in the fall of 2016. But guess what happened throughout the fall of 2016 into the start of the Trump administration? They continued with FISA warrants. Jim Comey signed off on these, among others, knowing that they had not vetted this information, knowing that they had not proven it to be true. They continued this process even in light of the facts that were before them. Why? Political purposes. I'm touching on this simply this way. We'll wrap up this trial. I will do a big, probably several day cap of this issue because I live this issue. What we were saying back then is true. What Devin Nunes was saying was true. What Jim Jordan, myself, and Trey Gowdy at the time, Bob Goodlatte at the time, others, we were uncovering was that the intertwining of the FBI at its highest level, as they sort of allude to in these testimony from trial, the seventh floor was the highest level of the FBI were in on this. We also know that the allegation that Clinton was going to use was actually briefed to President Obama in the White House. We know this because it's actually come out. Folks, I don't care what side of the fence you're on. Politically irrelevant to me. Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever you want to be. When you have the federal government using false information to investigate a political person who is in the middle of running for president of the United States, and you're desperate, as it seems to say, that they are looking desperately for information to stop him. Remember, at the underlying behind the scenes here, you have Peter Strzok and Lisa Page exchanging texts saying we have an insurance policy. We're going to take care of this. Why would he say something like that? Because he was in the middle of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation and had contact with the Trump administration. They were doing everything they could to bring this to light. The problem was it wasn't true. The bigger problem was you had a government agency working with a campaign on an issue against another candidate and taking the intel community at the same time, bringing them into it. Folks, you can't deny the problematic aspects here. You can't deny, no matter what side you're on, whether you like Donald Trump, don't like Donald Trump, like Hillary Clinton, don't like Hillary Clinton, irrelevant. What happened in this situation is wrong. What happened in this situation has got to be addressed. And I don't believe it's been addressed at this point. That's why I've talked about Chris Wray needing to resign. Chris Wray got a lot of information after the fact from the inspector generals. Some have been put into place, others haven't. I'm worried that this is still something that actually happens. So, look, we've had a long week, a lot of things going on. Wanted to catch you up on a couple of these things, but this investigation and this trial will wrap up, and I'll give you the breakdown, because some of you out there are still believing that there was a true fake, the true Russia investigation, that this was all about things that Donald Trump did. What this trials, what the Durham investigation is bringing out, that every bit of it was false, and every bit of it started back with the Clinton administration. By the way, the National Security Advisor right now, Jake Sullivan. Guess who put out the press releases and kept the discussion up, even when they knew it might not be true? Jake Sullivan, working for Hillary Clinton. He is now the National Security Advisor to Joe Biden. That should warn and be scary to anybody else. If he would blatantly lie about that, is he lying now about other things when he is in such a critical role? These are all issues that need to be discussed, but I wanted to bring them out. Let's watch this trial as it plays out. When it finishes, let's then do a deep dive, because this is far beyond just those times in the fall of 2016, just beyond the dossier. There's a concerted conspiracy here with the highest levels in the FBI and DOJ and the intel community. And this is something that's got to make sure it will never happen again. Because as I've said this before, and others have said it, if they can do this at this high level in a presidential campaign, can you imagine what they could do to you? That's why you listen to the Doug Collins podcast. I try to give you this information you can use and learn. Go out. Take wherever you get your podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, somebody shared it with you, share it with 5 other folks. If you're getting this podcast, I need to let you go. Make sure that you make a comment, rate the podcast. If you like it, give us a 5-star. We appreciate you being a part of the podcast. We want to grow our audience. We need your help to do that. If you're listening to this, please share it with 5 other individuals, or go to the DougCollinsPodcast.com. You can go to the email tab that comes to me. You give me your what your opinions are, what you would like to see. Maybe give me ideas on what you'd like to see on the podcast. Either way, we value you as a podcast listener. Thanks for being here today. I'll see you next time. Hey, everybody. I just want to talk about sleep. You know why I want to talk about sleep? It's because I just got out from underneath my MyPillow bed sheets and my pillow that I keep under my head every night, because I like to sleep on my side. I like to sleep on my back. I like to sleep, I move at night, and MyPillow is just the best thing that goes under my head. It keeps me getting restful sleep. The sheets are amazing. It's just what you need. Everybody understands you need 7 hours of sleep. Why not sleep in some of the best products out there? And Mike and the folks at MyPillow are great folks to do this with. And you can go to mypillow.com, or you can call them at 800-564-8475. Use code word Collins, Collins. You won't want to miss this. If you have not got these Giza bed sheets, you need them. They're amazing. They're soft. They don't wear out. You need those to get that sleep against your body at night and provide that cooling, just soothing nature that lets you get the most sleep. But they're not just about bed sheets and pillows. They also have the My Slippers. Amazing. I've talked to you about it before. I don't wear slippers, but I do wear My Slippers. They're amazingly comfortable. You can wear them outside. You can wear them inside. Great products. You've got towels. You've got all kinds of stuff. Go to mypillow.com. It's spring cleaning time. It's springtime to get out there and try and buy new things. Replace some of your old stuff. You'll want to replace your towels. Get some other products for your bedroom. All at mypillow.com. mypillow.com, or call 800-564-8475. Use the promo code Collins, Collins. When you check out, I guarantee you will be satisfied.